Hello, this is Kelly Kleiman, and you are listening to DealershipNews.com's podcast, where we spotlight the who's happening in the automotive industry. It's foot soldiers, visionary salesmen, GMs, owners, service managers, and industry vendors alike. Our guest today is Sandy Zannino of Innovative Auto HR, and our topic is a very controversial one regarding cultural diversity in the workplace and how that diversity can be used to a dealership's advantage, but with a big warning label attached. People tend to want to buy from those they feel most comfortable with. This can mean that language and shared culture, lifestyle, or beliefs play an important part in a customer's comfort level in buying from a car dealership. With that in mind, is it wise for a dealership to hire accordingly? Can we embrace polarization, diversity, and tribalism and turn it to our advantage without negative consequences? Sandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you finally. Hey, I love asking all of our guests the same question. How did Sandy Zannino get into the automotive industry? Was it something you've always loved, or did the door of opportunity just sort of swing open for you?
Well, it was definitely more of the door of opportunity swung open, and I kind of fell into it. It was back in 1998, and I was actually working for a commercial property appraiser, and I got to know the people next door. Little did I know that it was the corporate office for an automotive group, and so that's really where it started. They asked me if I wanted to interview for an office position, and it grew from there. I fell in love with the car business pretty much right away.
And here you are. So your company is Innovative Auto HR. It sort of explains itself, but before we get into our subject, what would your elevator pitch sound like if you were trapped on the 20th floor of the Dealership News building there in Miami with the owner of a large dealership group?
Well, I am the automotive HR expert, and what I do is help dealers protect their profits through HR compliance, training, and coaching.
That was 15 seconds. You've got 15 seconds more. Go. Just kidding.
Well,
outstanding.
The elevator pitch, it needs to be fast for dealers. The attention span for HR is very short.
I can't even give you a number as to how many podcasts I've done, but that was the shortest, most precise elevator pitch I've ever heard. That went from the first floor to the second floor, and it was done. I've had folks get on for 5 minutes. And how big was this building? Anyway, so...
Well, you've got to be quick, and it is clear. You know exactly what I do, right?
Exactly. When dealerships in your sphere of influence hire personnel, do they generally hire personnel to reflect the cultural makeup of the area, or is that not as important as finding someone who could simply show up on time, sell or fix a car, work the deal desk, and hopefully stick around for a little while?
Kelly, I love this question. I am still trying to get most hiring managers that I know to hire for organizational and characteristic fit. And, in my experience, hiring managers are, as you say, more concerned with getting that body in the bay, on the sales floor, which I understand. So no, they're not necessarily, at least in my, sphere, they're not necessarily looking to reflect the community that they operate in.
It was sort of a loaded question because that's exactly where we're going to go with this. Let's say they start doing something along those lines, and we'll dig in here as we go. We'll sort of shoot from the hip. But if they started hiring, let's say, for example, you have a large Asian and Spanish makeup. You start hiring people who speak both languages or parts of both culture. What happens to the concept of a fair next up rotation system if dealers decided to match walk-ins, calls, and other leads with sales personnel that match the ethnicity of that potential customer? And we know it makes sense, but does it open the door to potential HR issues, in your opinion?
Well, yes, I think that it does, and I think we're really kind of talking about two different things. Creating a workforce and that looks like your community is very important, and making sure that workforce is, diverse through all of your department levels, versus matching clients with salespeople that's what we're talking about, salespeople. I would leave that, in the realm of the salesperson building their own clientele within their community. And when we talk about a tribe isn't necessarily just ethnicity or language.
Right.
It could be a tribe of soccer moms.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, it can. So when we're talking about diversity, and we can't leave women out of this picture as well. Obviously, I'm a woman that's been in automotive for the last 20 years, so it's it's an issue and a movement. Now, your question to what are the problems that I would see if the dealers decided to match their Spanish language or whatever ethnicity you have. Language, I think, is very important to have people who speak the same language in order to communicate as your customers coming in the door. But when you're talking about matching ethnicity, I think that the main HR issue to see on the employer side with that is that the ethnicity clearly is going to be a minority. So in HR speak, you're talking about a protected status. The dealer should, if they're going to do something like that, should make sure that they're not creating an atmosphere where the minorities on their sales force are not receiving as much opportunity for income as everybody else. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does. What are some of the options to work around potential HR issues that you have when you know that culture ethnicity matching is effective, but possibly taboo? Could it be fashion dynamic ads that appeal to specific affinity groups with a call to action, including maybe the appropriate contact at the dealership? In other words, run some ads that pertain to specific lifestyles, or again, diversity, diverse lifestyles, and then contact so and so at this particular dealership, and then everybody gets sort of a fair shake at it. And I'll give you an example: a Korean language ad with the contact point being a Korean salesperson, or perhaps a Jewish-oriented ad being funneled to a Jewish salesperson. And without bloviating like crazy over here, I will just tell you that my wife is part Korean and Japanese, and and I had mentioned this to you earlier, when she goes to a Japanese or Korean restaurant or store, and they find out that she's Korean or Japanese, she gets deals, and they feel comfortable talking to her. So aside from that, are there workarounds so everybody does get a fair shake?
Well, I am definitely not a marketing guru. It's not what I do. But what I would caution is to do. I'm really a do things in moderation kind of a person. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about language and you have a Spanish-speaking market, for sure, I'm in Florida. There's a big Spanish-speaking market. So if you're going to do a Spanish language ad, of course, you're going to, you would have that. Again, I would also, it's important to teach and train our salespeople about building the relationship, because, you can speak the same language as someone and still not build the relationship, and they might not come back just because of this, just because it's someone that speaks their language. So the client relationship ends up being, for me, the most important, and where employers can focus their resources in really connecting, perhaps through having salespeople that speak the same language or come from the same background, but then building on that, I think, is really important. Kelly, I think the one thing that I see about this that kind of gives me the is, we want to attract our customers, but we don't want to profile them. We don't want to make them feel profiled. And that's why I think I lean more toward helping our staff build their own clientele base within their community and within their whatever tribe it is, and leaving it in their realm and the customer realm.
So potentially through social media, and they do it on their own prerogative.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really becoming kind of a trend. I see salespeople all over building. They're branding themselves as. I mean, we all know Ali Rada, right? Mm-hmm. The number one salesperson in the country. And, he has a brand, and, it's pretty amazing how that works. And I think that dealers can help their sales staff to do that, and in that way bring a whole new market into their dealership.
Yeah, that makes the solution a lot easier when you think about it. Social media is really simple. It's done privately. I mean, it's done socially, obviously, over the platform, but nonetheless, it's the other folks in the dealership aren't being left out. It's really up to their own efforts. But there are issues.
Yes.
So when you see a dealer leadership and they don't have a diversity or cultural sensitivity training program in play, or just not that they're not about that. How do you prevent bad seeds from poisoning the workplace with unwelcome opinions, attitudes, and biases? Because again, you're still hiring, and it really could be anybody, but you're hiring conservatives, liberals, blacks, whites, New York Yankee fans, and Boston Red Sox fans. They don't get along very well either, right? So, with that said, what are some of the issues that come up? What are some of the solutions, and what steps can an HR person take to make sure that things go relatively smoothly? I know that wasn't in the written questions I submitted before, but let's see if we can kind of go off script here a little bit, because I think
Sure.
an HR person, and we know the HR person that we use here, is very, very cognizant of differences and is very sensitive to everybody's needs and concerns.
Well, that's really it's an awesome question. It's also a very a broad question, and the answer could go different ways. I think the first part of that is having just training in general, and some of that can be incorporated in what I hope every employer does annually, and that is anti-harassment training. Because when we're talking about biases, when we're talking about unconscious bias, okay, we don't think about it. It's unconscious. So we don't realize that we're doing it, and we all have them. We all have them. And so the first part to do that, you could incorporate some, maybe cultural sensitivity training right within your annual harassment training. Could be one way to bring this to the forefront of people's minds in the workplace. And as far as bad seeds, that's cultural, and the management from the top down has to be willing to bring these things to light. I think that sometimes it's a very natural thing to want something to go away. Especially in our business, managers are so busy, and you never know what's going to pop up. So if someone says something inappropriate, either about a client to another employee, I think sometimes that we just want it to go away, right? I think that's a natural inclination, when what we need to do is train our managers to know how to respond to these things that happen. It's when we don't train that not only lawsuits within the organization can happen on an employment level, but also all you have to do today is look at Starbucks, most recently Sephora,
Yep.
what has happened on the client level, and how, so their response, both those companies' response was to close for a certain period and, nationwide, and do, some training, do some diversity training and sensitivity training. And once just like every problem, you don't know until you know. And I think that it's the same as far as this, and as far as, understanding what other people who don't look like you, don't sound like you, didn't grow up like you, but have in their life. And once you do that, then you can put yourself in other people's shoes. And when that happens, then you have some real and meaningful ways to communicate and get along in the world.
Are you familiar with any cultural diversity or cultural sensitivity programs that are out there that are directed strictly towards car dealerships?
Not I was going to say yes, I do, until you got to strictly for car dealerships.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't know of any right away, but this conversation will make me research that. Who knows? Maybe it'll be another another vertical.
That's what I'm thinking. I'd love to discuss with you possibly writing an article on this. Devin Ruff over there we had a conversation with him. He's out of New York, and we're co-authoring an article. Him from a marketing standpoint, and myself from a just an overall view of diversity and how it should be considered an important tool to use and to understand in a car dealership. So maybe from an HR standpoint, you could help contribute to that as well. And who knows, maybe we'll be on a panel someday, right?
Well, there's a real business case for creating a more diverse workforce. You can look up studies, and you will see that the bottom line increases the more diverse your workforce is. So growing it organically, I think, is what is really important, and not trying to force it, not creating an atmosphere where you are profiling your customers and putting them with certain people, but letting that grow naturally by simply creating a more diverse workforce. And one thing that I think is really important, there's a way to start doing that, and that dealers can check their workforce. Right now everybody's doing the EEO1, so they've got their demographics right there.
Yeah.
They know what their demographics are if they are an employer with over 100. So it's pretty easy to find on your in your state website or the DOL what the demographic is for the area in which you live. So it should match. It should really kind of match. And the other part of that is that I always caution is to make sure that it's matching across departments. Make sure that your minorities are not all in car wash,
right?
Or make sure they're
right.
on the sales floor. And what's it look like in your management staff? So if dealers do that, it's going to naturally create a higher bottom line.
I'm with you on that. Hey, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Devin Ruff is the Vice President of Business Development at Digisphere Marketing, and we did a podcast with him, I want to say, about 2 weeks ago. Sandy, I want to thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Kelly.
And I was going to have you guess the band that's playing this music.
I do not know.
Chicago.
Sadly, I don't know. I think it's like a 70s band.
It's Chicago. It's actually from the 70s.
Chicago.
You nailed it. That's good. Okay, so you get $2.50, not $5. Hey, folks, Sandy Zannino of Innovative Auto HR. This is Kelly Kleiman. This is the Dealership News Podcast for Friday, June 7th, 2019. Summer's right around the corner. Sandy, again, thank you for joining us, and have a great weekend, everybody.
You have a happy day. Thank you.